morning, everybody. It is Marissa Friedman from the Center for Respectful Leadership. I am so excited to be with you this morning. I've had quite a few of you guys reach out to me about specifically what we put in the post today. So I want to read this for everybody. 25% of Americans expect to be disrespected in the next 24 hours. I want that to sink in for all of you that are tuning in this morning. I want you to take a second. I want you to put down your phone. I want you to put down your tablet. I want you to close your personal laptop. Maybe leave like your Microsoft Teams open, shake the mouse a little bit so people think you're working. And I want you to focus on what we're going to be chatting about this morning. I am so excited to bring yet another esteemed advisory council member onto our Reclaiming Respect Community Solution session. So if you're not aware, we do these solution sessions as a way to kind of talk about what's going on in the events of corporate America and small business and leadership. We also have our executive director here with us this morning. And I have to tell you, I'm super excited because there's a couple things that are going on, right? We are getting ready to go back to work. Some of you are excited to be away from family members. Some of you are terrified that you might actually have to wear real clothes again. So with that, I'm going to bring in our executive director, Greg Ward. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. I think I'm wearing real clothes, but only up
here. Are
you
able to stand up? That is the question.
Nope, not going to happen. Well, Thank you so much, Marissa. This is great.
So this is always like the funnest time of the month for me.
It is.
And I think one of the things that I was trying to get across to everybody is we have so many different kind of champions of change within our advisory council. And I'm going to let you introduce our guest today because you guys go back a really long time. And while I disappear, I'm going to be in the background making sure this stream is getting everywhere on the internet. Okay?
Okay. Great. Thank you, Marissa. Hi, everybody. I'm Greg Ward, the Executive Director for the Center for Respectful Leadership. And this is our Community Reclaiming Respect monthly session that we do with experts from our advisory council and also from all over the world talking about respect and respectful leadership in the workplace. Today, we have with us a dear friend and colleague who I've known for very many years. His name is Kevin Rafferty, and he is just an awesome human being. Kevin began his career many, many years ago studying under the great Peter Drucker, I believe, at Claremont Universities in California, eventually became a management consultant serving Fortune 500 companies all over the world. He has taken many different roles as an executive coach, as a consultant, as a specialist and an expert, and he's also been CEO of a number of big companies as well. So Kevin has this world-rounded experience, and he is also a dear friend and colleague. So we invited him into the advisory council very early on when we stood up the Center for Respectful Leadership, and he very graciously accepted. And he joins us here now today to talk about going back to work and some of the challenges that people are facing from the perspective not only of the employee, but also the perspective of the employer. Kevin, welcome so much to our Reclaiming Respect Solutions session.
Good morning, Greg. Good morning, everyone. And I, too, am wearing regular clothes. This is my lucky golf shirt. So I'm feeling the joy today, ready to be with you all.
Great. So let's dive into this topic here because I was just watching the news just 15 minutes ago, and sure enough, there's yet another piece on CNN and MSNBC and Fox talking about how employers are really frustrated. They can't get their employees to come back to work, and a lot of states are saying, okay, we're going to stop giving them their extra federal unemployment benefits because it's too easy for them to just stay home and collect unemployment, and they don't want to go back to work. Kevin, what do you think of that meme that employees don't want to go back to work?
So I've been an employer many times, and you're in a quandary of especially when you're in a time when you're coming out of a recession and you're ready to ramp up, and in days past, throughout our whole baby boomer lifetime, Greg, we've always been able to find people. That was never an issue.
Right.
However, that was the old model of work. The way I see it, where I see a real watershed change potentially happening right now. COVID was the end, maybe for many, of the old normal, what I call the old normal of how we used to do things. I need a job, I go get a job, then I hate my job.
Yeah.
But I can't leave my job, so I stay in my job and I hate my job.
Yep.
And I give my employer maybe 50% of what I've got, because if you look at the Gallup numbers, they're still fairly consistent that only half of the people at work are about half engaged.
Right.
Just enough to keep a paycheck. That old paradigm to me is toxic. It's deadly. It sucks. And I was hoping, and I'm still hoping, that COVID was enough of a wake-up call, not only for the employers, but also the employees. Because there's two sides of this coin. If I can't find work, well, why is that? Because I want a higher wage, but what kind of work am I really good at? What kind of work do I really want to do? And if you had enough time sitting at home, because you lost your job, how much time did someone have a chance to really reevaluate themselves and reevaluate their career? Because it's not the company's job to find you the right job. It's our job to find our own right job. However, at the same time, the companies keep having this old mantra of I got to find the best person at the lowest wage, and that's their mindset. That's their paradigm. That's the one I think has to get blown out. But that requires a leader and a leadership team to change, to really kind of like wake up themselves and go, holy smokes, what's my model now going forward? What kind of culture do we want to now create?
And what we saw, and sorry to interrupt you, what we saw during the recession is the leaders of big corporations actually doing even better during during COVID, and all these folks unemployed.
Why do you think that is?
Good question.
Yeah, why were they doing better? I can answer that because I've asked a few of them. And the answer is, hey, we kept all of our best and brightest.
Yep.
Now, what does that say? They know who the people who are committed, who are aligned and engaged with whatever that is, and those people they're there because they want to be there. They don't just want a job. Right. Something about that culture or the product or the leadership or whatever sings to their hearts. And then we give more when we're in that kind of a loving, respectful place, right?
Yes. And we look at the industries where jobs were lost wholesale, such as hospitality, restaurant industry. Those industries traditionally pay the lowest amounts. And so who do you have working in those industries? Folks who really don't have the skills or training or expertise to be in those higher paid jobs. And so employers consider them, they laid them off like the moment the lockdown started happening, boom, they were laid off like instantaneously. And without any kind of help. It was just goodbye, we're done. And so the employee's saying to themselves, okay, this is how I'm treated. Why the heck do I want to go back to work for that same company that if something else goes bad or some manager makes a dumb decision, they're going to fire me again overnight? And so, and especially this hit women especially bad, who were juggling childcare issues and single moms, costing more to go to work than it would be to stay home and collect unemployment. So I guess I'm a little bit tired of employers blaming their employees for not wanting to come back to work in a crappy job where they're treated disrespectfully and could be fired overnight and make so little money it's not even worth going to the job. So I'm a little bit annoyed with employers for pushing this idea that employees are lazy and don't want to work.
Hey, Greg, I wanted to share some statistics with both of you guys. There was a recent article that came out from Eater magazine. I'm going to go ahead and drop that comment in the links for our viewers to watch. But basically, between March and April of 2020, okay, when cities started closing off, more than 3 million restaurant workers lost their jobs. That does not include hospitality. That does
Right.
not include nightclubs. These are just restaurant numbers, right? They talk about the numbers in Vegas of just the city
Right.
being decimated. Of that, what they found was that so many people had to figure out and learn new skills. So what they saw was an increase. And obviously you guys saw Google rolled out their certification program where they've gotten rid of degree requirements at their organization. They basically said, we're going to fix our problem. Now, obviously they're big tech, right? They've got this ability to say, we're going to create the curriculum we want for our pathway for entry level employees. What was really interesting in that article is it talked about people going back and having to get new skills out of need and necessity. And once they realized, okay, if I can make the same amount and I'm doing back-breaking labor, but I can make the same amount in an office or freelancing or doing all these different things, they took that and they didn't look back. So I thought that was really interesting from a numbers perspective. And again, they are trying to hire people, dependability, other things. And I think what this brings us back to is a certain level of empathy. If you know that, for example, in our situation, one of our children is in school 4 days a week. One of our children is only in school 2 days a week. So there is some shuffling that's going on. And so I think employers really need to wake up and look at how do we create a little bit of flexibility and not do that whole like, oh, it's 9:04, it's 9:03. Like we have to change that model.
Yes.
We have to allow for a little bit of grace. And I can tell you recently I went on, Greg knows I was looking for some part-time roles just to kind of supplement my freelancer income. And I sat in an interview and they're still asking, oh, we're really looking for someone to be here for the long term. Or, what about this position was really of interest to you? I looked at the guy and he looked at me and we're grown-ups, right? And I think I'm older than him. And I just looked at him and I said, the money. That's what was really great about the position. And he just looked at me and he started laughing. And I'm like, would you like me to say that I'm really a big fan of heart-centered leadership and I really want this culture of happy hour at 2? Or do you want me to like you can't have it both ways. You can't have a solid person that's going to be effective on day one. And then also ask them. I can't believe people are still asking this question, Greg. It's been 7 years since I've been out in the market looking at things. And who, long term, according to what, right? The average tenure, I think max they say is somewhere around 2.5 years.
Right.
So, and that's like that is a long time.
It's a long time for a millennial for sure.
Yeah.
And I was trying to reconcile that with what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing. I think, and that brings up kind of our next thing that we were talking about, which was employers that are starting to say, we're going to go ahead and adjust our work from home schedules, right? USA Today.
Hybrid.
With that hybrid model. But, they started asking people and people are like, like there is a percentage of people that do want to be in the office, right? Certain, my husband's in financial services, right? He's got the 17 monitors he's looking at. That's the setup that I would prefer that he be in, as Greg has experienced over the pandemic and seen us. However, they're finding so much resistance to it because people are now in their comfort zone. So what are your thoughts on this kind of hybrid return to work model? I'd love to hear that.
Kevin, go for it.
Yeah, my clients are loving what COVID taught them. First of all, they're the ones who are sort of my more conscious clients have admitted the fact that COVID taught them how to trust. The old model was you have to be in the office for, 8 hours, 5 days a week, because I know where I can see you. I can control you in some way. That's just leaked into our unconscious across the board. COVID blew that part of it up for the leader who is a bit more or a lot more aware of what's really happening. And so they're now excited. In fact, they're looking forward to reducing footprint, which is rent space and lease space. There is a whole beautiful benefit for them, but see, it's going to require them to change their model of how they think about work, about what maybe their purpose of their business is, to maybe include more of a human quotient to it. For God's sakes, a novel idea. Like maybe we might have a purpose that might be beyond just making money for the shareholders for kind of, that kind of a thing.
Right.
And so the ones who are getting it, who are really waking up from COVID, are saying, look, what do we want to do? Maybe a hybrid might work, because we still want to have a little bit of that human touch. There's nothing like being in the space with another human being. But we've also learned that a huge amount of our work can be just like what we're doing right here.
Yep.
Just
Absolutely.
as effectively in a lot less time. The average worker spends 4 hours a day actually doing work in the office and 4 hours getting into meetings that they really don't need or pulling them away or BS time around the water cooler or whatever. So go do the work at home for 4 hours. Maybe go in once a week, maybe twice a week if you want to, or for some big events. But there are businesses out there that are getting it, and they're going to be evolving. It's going to take a little while for them to really get comfortable around what that new is. But that would be the kind of place I would hope that a lot of the people who are out of work can rethink about, well, where do I fit? What do I want? What works for me? How much human touch do I need? Yeah.
I think you both have exceptional emotional intelligence and understanding of not only like the brain in the workplace, but understanding this direct relationship between, leadership, middle management, and staff members, right? And so I think overall, the studies showed that 25% of people were totally comfortable with a hybrid schedule. However, this all ties into the secondary conversation around mental health. And here's what's really interesting. I was following, Greg knows, I study all mediums of social media to understand. And it was really funny. There's these little content creators on a platform called TikTok. Now, these are 30 to 90-second videos. Now, there's one young woman. She goes by the name of Corporate Natalie. And all she does is talk about the trauma that the corporate workplace has inflicted on her. Highly recommended, right? So deciphering corporate speak. But, they work at really big companies. But it was really touching on the fact that in the last year, people felt very comfortable talking about why they liked working from home. It wasn't just comfort of that. It was social anxieties. In fact, 35% were leery of having to engage in small talk that wasn't meaningful. 28% of people felt that they had almost forgotten how to socialize. And 18% were worried, about having to interact with people that maybe weren't in their department or area. So I think there's a real combination here from people being really comfortable with saying, hey, I'm a kind of an anxious person, and I don't like to talk to a lot of people, and the office is a little overstimulating for me. And also, I want to have conversations of meaning, right? How many times have we all thought, hey, this meeting should have been an email, right? And I think that's what's really interesting that you guys are both touching on is this human-centric need. Now, that begs about the question, when you think about how people are applying for jobs today, what would you say to employers that have implemented these ATS systems that, you click in the wrong spot and you're taken out of the mix immediately, right? So there's this big conversation globally about humanizing and rehumanizing the HR space, because for so long, HR has just been like this punitive branch that protects the company. So I'd like to talk about that and how what are things employers can do? You touched on trust, Kevin. I think that's huge. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Greg.
Well, I couldn't agree with Kevin more around trust. And the research that we've been doing at CRL, there's this kind of chicken and egg thing around respect and trust. And what we've come to is that in a new relationship, if the employer makes the effort to treat the employee with respect from the get-go, the likelihood is that the employee will reciprocate the respect, and it has a tendency to be more loyal, to go the extra mile when going gets tough. And over time, when the employer and the employee together start to fulfill what we call the 4 conditions of trust: reliability, competence, concern for others' best interests, and openness and honesty, when those are starting to be fulfilled, then trust really builds. But we believe, I've now come to the conviction that in a new relationship, respect must come first. And I urge employers, rather than assuming that their employees should be treated with disrespect in order to control them, treat them with respect first, and you're much more likely to have an employee who wants to work, who wants to put in the extra hours, who feels respected, who feels like there's meaning to the job. I know you ran a manufacturing company, and you had to have people coming through the doors every day in order to provide your customers with your products, correct? So
Right.
say some more about that respect, trust continuum.
Greg, I think your comments are spot on. And let me bolt a few things onto that. I've really thought about this a lot. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? And in this regard, I think trust is the foundational glue of everything. I mean, think about people when you love them. Well, when you say I love somebody, well, what does that really mean? Love can be a flighting emotion. It could be a biological urge, whatever. But when you truly love, it's because there's a layer of trust that's already been established.
Yes.
Somehow, whether there was a respectful conversation or many of those, or just some real concern and some understanding about what makes people tick, you make other people feel safe first, then welcome second. Those are, to me, the foundations of trust. And to the other side of that, I like to use the word regard when I think about respect. Do I actually have regard for people? Do I actually like people? Just because I'm in a leadership role, and unfortunately, there's way too many people that have been promoted beyond their people quotient pay grade, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
They're talented at this, they're competent at that. So we elevate them, and then they suck. I don't know how else to say it. As a leader, they're not a leader. They may be a good manager, but they're not a leader. A leader, to me, understands the people side of things,
right,
and is naturally going to reach out and say, hello, welcome in. Let me tell you how we do things here.
Exactly.
We bring you in. We want to know who you are. Hey, what do you need to be your best at the place I hire you for?
Right.
Jesus, you find a job like that, you're in for life there. If you can stay there long.
Yes, you are.
Where do you find them?
I heard something momentous right now, which was people quotient pay grade. And I think of all of the people that are listening right now, you will probably have an army of VPs of sales that fit that role. They were the best sales guy in the entire company,
right,
the strongest individual contributor. And leadership went, that's our VP of sales. That's our chief growth officer. That's our chief revenue officer.
Mm-hmm.
And they...
deer in the headlights.
They're not deer in the headlights. They've only ever been a team of one. They're only an individual. And they compete against their own people, right? And they cause a lot. I mean, I think like you guys could do an entire podcast on the people. That's like a thing. I popped in because I was like, oh, I also wanted to take a moment to read Kirsten Riley. Kirsten Riley wrote in and she said, respect comes from the employer first and respect from the employee will follow. Employers need to set those expectations. And I think that's scary.
Yeah.
I think that is a scary thing in the traditional power structure of the way companies operate.
Right.
Russ, it's not only scary, it's I don't know how to do that. They're not even, maybe there's too many of them that are not aware.
Yes.
Being respectful is a key component. I hired you. You're mine. Now do what I say. That is still too prevalent.
Yep.
Too prevalent. From the baker at the lowest level of the entrepreneur business scale to the Fortune 500, 200, 100.
Yep.
That's a paradigm. That's between one's ears of how we see the world. And that's the change I'm talking about that has to occur.
And that's what we're trying to do, aren't we, Marissa, with our new programs, right?
I think so much of what we've learned, and I'm just interrupting because it's super, the timing is perfect, but we had, one of the things when I met Greg was like, what is your legacy? Like, what are we doing? And I love the work that the center does. I love the work that all of our champions of change do. For so many, though, it is out of reach. It is like, it just feels inaccessible. Like, do I have to get a degree to get this work? Like, my company doesn't have $100,000 to throw at a program, no matter how great it is. And so I want to take a second and just share with everybody kind of something that we were working on. Now, last week we announced Boston Herald picked up. We actually have our learning programs online with a company called HR.com. We also have our own instance of it. We call it the Roadmap to Respect. And the Roadmap to Respect, if you will do me the favor and humor me, I think we had over 1,000 people comment on this video that we wrote. And I really particularly had fun working on this with Greg because I was particularly frustrated. So this video is actually, I will never say the company that it was about, but it's actually a real company. This is a problem in that company. But what we really focused on and what Greg did was try to create essentially 3 formats of programming that was easy for someone to go in and learn. And what the data is showing us is that people are actually going in, they are actually coming into these programs, and they are purchasing the programs for their entire team. So we have 3 programs, one that's around being respected as an individual, and it's called the Keys to Gaining Respect. We have another one that's for our mid-level managers called, Earn Great Respect, Build Strong Leadership, for those that want to lead respectfully. And then if you want to create this huge ecosystem within your small to mid-sized business, it's the Habits of Respectful Teams. Now, the reason I'm telling you about that is because these happen to not be $250,000 a piece. They're a very reasonable price point. And if you're looking to add some really incredible programming into your organization, give us a call. We'll go over this stuff with you. We spent an exceptional amount of time talking to people. Imagine that, actually talking to people, going beyond the traditional learning and development process to find out what mattered to people. And surprisingly, this stuff, guys, doesn't cost you a lot to implement because it really just requires you to see things differently. And I think we've all done this. We've had a negative experience with someone at work, and every time we see them, we've assigned a tone to their email, their texting, how they're presenting, and that's not fair. So again, take a moment to check it out. In our website, you'll see it. It's the online learning programs. We'll make sure to hyperlink that. We also have some opportunities. We've got about 4 or 5 affiliates that are out there. So if you are a coach or you are a consultant and right now today you don't have a learning and development team that's putting together your own curriculum, you can help us get our message out about respect and you can get compensated for that. So I think that is super duper cool. Super pumped about that. And I had to do it because it's just so apropos at this very moment. So I'm going to shut up now and bring the experts back in. And here we go. I had to interrupt you. I couldn't. I also could see that there was employers feel that they own the employees. So I appreciate Kirsten taking some time to just comment. This kind of stuff just lets us know that we're on track with what we're talking about. So if you're seeing this, I know a couple of you on Instagram are like, my comments aren't showing up. Don't worry, we see them, we've got you, and you're supported. Back to you, Greg.
I wanted to talk a little bit about my own, my son's experience working for a very large company, and he was hired in as a manager, and that's all very well and good. But what happened is it's very quickly, because they had a command and control structure, he was expected to command and control the people who worked for him. And this was a retail operation, very large. And one of the most disrespectful things that he found about the whole thing is the employees, including him, were not given their schedule of the weeks or 2 weeks work until literally the day or 2 before. So imagine you're a parent, right? And even forget about being a parent. Imagine you're a human being and you want to plan out your next 2 weeks. You've got things going on in your life with loved ones or something like that, but your employer hasn't told you what shifts you're going to be working until the day or 2 before you're supposed to work them. How disrespectful is that? I would not work for such a company. I would, and in fact, he put up with it for 3 months because the money was so good. Their business was doing extraordinarily in COVID, so they were throwing tons of overtime at him. So he said, "Dad, I'm just going to stay with this for 3 months, and I'm going to make a ton of money, and I'm just going to suffer, and then I'm going to get out." And that's exactly what he did. And who can blame him? He's a good kid. He's responsible. When he was at work, he worked really, really hard. But at the end of the day, he felt his employer had zero respect for him. So why should he go out of his way to do anything for them?
Bravo that he had the self-care quotient.
Yeah.
To take care of himself first.
Yep.
I mean, we all can sell ourselves for a little while, right? We've all done that.
Yep.
But it sounds like he went into it with his eyes wide open, more so than maybe most people do.
He did. And he said that's a practice throughout the entire company, and it's a massive global company, and that was their practice, a retailing operation. You don't give the employees their schedules until a day or two beforehand. Are you kidding me?
Turn them and burn them is what they're used to. That's their culture.
Yeah.
I'll give you a contrary example to that, Greg. If you research the Container Store, they're started in Texas. They're kind of big in certain areas, but they had studied human nature, and they realized that one great employee is worth 3 regular employees. Now they're in retail. Mm-hmm. They hire, the people that'll tell you where to get your Tupperware thing or your plastic thing or whatever it is. But those people, they're the kind of people that the vision and the culture of the company is so well articulated and so well thought out from a human side that it attracts those people that want to work in a place like that. And when you find it, it's kind of like being in love. Though you want to stay there and you want to give it your best.
Yes.
That's an example of what I would hope we all can enjoy in our life at some point in time, if not a great deal of our time at work. We spend so much time at work.
And my assumption is, Kevin, that the numbers, the bottom line numbers for the Container Store are really good.
Way up.
Got it.
And they pay those people extraordinarily high above minimum wage or anything else.
Right.
And the benefits are, hey, here, what's your schedule like? Who can work here? Who can work there?
Right.
They're very flexible.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting that you brought up the Container Store, because I had pulled up as a backup of stores that we could talk about. Container Store was there. Trader Joe's was there.
Trader Joe's. Mm-hmm.
It was really funny. A friend of mine, I won't say which one he works at, but he was talking about how they do encourage them to be really friendly. And I remember some of my friends saying like, yeah, I think the guy at Trader Joe's likes me. And I'm like, no, they encourage them to be very attentive. And they also encourage their employees to pay attention to, hey, like, what were some of the most requested items and products? So their employees are very like on high alert. Same thing with, it sounds funny, but In-N-Out Burger. In-N-Out Burger has a starting, I believe their starting salary is about $18.75.
$17.95 the last time I heard. Yeah.
So in California, $18.95, and then like managers come in at around $25 an hour. You go into that same thing with, controversial, people love hate is Chick-fil-A as well, right?
Yeah.
So, but what I will say is when you do go to those places, you notice there is an exceptional service level as opposed to, what was I telling someone the other day? Like, I think self-checkout is probably the worst invention in history, mainly because I just feel like I need to put on an apron and, I go at night to learn the different codes so that I don't hold up the line. My anxiety is about like holding up the line, right? So like, I know the codes for avocado and lettuce, and I'm ready to go. I have trained myself on this machine. And I was like, so what I said, do you ever notice the poor one person that is in charge of the self-checkout area at Walmart and the Target and, the groceries? They look so stressed. All it takes is one person to ring up one too many avocados and the system doesn't work, right? And my husband always laughs. He's like, why are you helping people? You don't work here. And I'm like, I feel like I do. But I think when you see things like that we're supposed to increase efficiency for whom, right?
For the employer.
And I am not a fan. The Amazon stores, although they're cool from a technological perspective, I don't know if you've been in any of those lately. You scan in with your Amazon code, get what you need, and you walk out. There is no human interaction because everything is tagged. Now, that sounds great until you have a question, right? And so I think what you're seeing, though, is companies that are willing to invest in culture from the hiring point. They know who they are. And I think a lot of employers are trying to figure out who they are now. So what would your guys' suggestions be? You've got a C-level executive that's in front of you that's trying to figure this out. They have this task of balancing kind of risk and reward. What's the real conversation look like? Like if they say, how do I do this? We already know that they can't do it the way they used to. So it's kind of like, I don't want to say adapt or die, but what do you say to this person to kind of slap, head flick them a little bit and say, hey,
I would say, first off, be willing to let go of your preconceptions about how things should be. The studies that came out before COVID around workplaces that had a very flexible work schedule, you can choose to telecommute when you want, and so on and so forth. What those studies showed is that employees actually put in more time doing work if they were able to do it on their own schedule, do it at home, than they were putting in if they had to commute into an office. So it's very, very interesting that if you just let go of what Kevin was talking about, that preconception of if I see you, then I know you're working. Well, baloney. And you trust, go back to trust, that you're sure. Are there people out there who are so-called slackers who just want to collect a paycheck and do as least amount of work as possible? Of course there are. But they self-identify themselves pretty damn quickly. And if you're savvy and smart, you can see those people and you move them out of the organization. That leaves everyone else. And not everybody wants to come in all the time. Other people do. Be flexible, be willing to see things through a different lens, and trust that most people are not out to screw you. And if you take that perception, I think you're much more likely to have a workforce that at least feels respected and trusted to the point where they're gonna flex for you too.
What about you, Kevin? What do you think? I mean, I think that's really interesting. I'd just like to point out about Kevin's style, right? It's around kind of this conscious leadership movement.
Yes.
So I would love to kind of hear your thoughts, because I think a lot of people love throwing buzzwords around that they can't define. So I would love to hear from your perspective as someone that's, effectively working in this space. Like, what do you think? I mean, I got the be willing to let go of should. I think that's really important. What do you think, Kevin?
I will go right to my clients and say, let me just ask you directly, on a scale of 1 to 100, how much do you actually like people? Point out. And then I use examples of what I've seen of evidence of not liking people and say, well, how does that fit? And I'll challenge them. So a leader needs to have their thinking challenged, their assumptions challenged. And that way, whether you get a coach, you get good training, or you get a consulting team to come in, however you do it, you have to be willing to start the process of the change within. I'm always a big one on getting the leaders. If you want to change an organization, change the thinking and the assumptions and the heart of the leader first. CEO, C-suite, next level down. Nothing is going to change unless that changes. And so, the second thing is, how would you like to be if you were one of your employees? This is a great question that I can ask, and anyone who's listening can take it in if you're a leader. How would you, if you were one of your employees, how would you want your day to be when you wake up in the morning and it's a Tuesday and you have to go to work? Imagine yourself in your employee's shoes for a minute. And how would you like them to really feel? How would you like them to wake up eager to go to work? What would have to be going on in your company to make that person want to get up, have a quick cup of coffee, and get on the road to go to work? What would have to happen when they walk through the front door? How does it have to feel? Where do they work? Their physical space, is it welcoming or is it dark and dank? How's the team that they're on? How's that team working? And how do we know how that team is working? How do we keep track not only of their productivity, but also of their quality and helping them continue to grow in their job? If you were in your employee's shoes for 8 hours, what kind of an experience do you want them to have? And then when I ask that question and they really get out of their own crap and they get into their human side, it's incredible. In minutes, I can see a transformation in the way they're looking at their own business. So you want a really, really quick fix for you listeners out there? If you're a leader, do this exercise and write it down. And then ask your teammates, your peers, or your next ups or downs, how would it be? And do we have that kind of a place? And if we don't have it, what the hell do we have to let go? What do we need to keep that's still working? And then what new stuff do we need to be willing to bring in? If you don't do this and you're not a respectful environment, you're going to stay non-respectful, period. No matter how much we
your
ask,
turnover,
it ain't going to happen.
will be high. Your
Nothing will
complaints will
change.
be high. Lawsuits, settlements, mistakes, problems. Customers will be complaining. And I was going to say that show, as hokey as it was, Undercover Boss. Do you remember that show?
Yeah.
You know, the boss would go undercover and do the most menial job in his or her company.
Yeah.
And very often the boss would go, "Oh my God, I had no idea of how difficult this was or how demeaning this was." And hopefully the boss had a genuine, sometimes it was faked, genuine change of heart. But I think that's what you're advocating for is have a change, be willing to have a change of heart.
You have to be able to start the process of re-evolving yourself first if you're a leader. You have to expand your level of being able to be present to yourself and to others. You have to look at your own self-awareness quotient, your own emotional intelligence quotient. How well of a culture builder are you? How well of a people developer are you? And those are the honey that will bring the right bees into your culture. But you gotta work on, well, what are we doing now? How are we receiving new people? How many people do we really need now? All those people that they had in those cubicles, if you take the Container Store model, 2/3 of them aren't really needed in the first place. If you had a stud team that wanted to be there and were working together, there is a lot of evidence in the conscious capitalism movement, if you want to call it. There are now hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples of people who've been doing this for quite some time. And their level of profitability is high. Their level of bonuses and revenue sharing and profit sharing are very high, and they don't have turnover.
I really want to commend both of you because I think so much of what, I happen to be Latina and Pacific Islander. And so when we go into workplaces, so much of the stuff talks about like the middle-aged white guy boss, right? And I want to point out to anybody that's watching, these are not two typical guys that are in the leadership space. Like, it blows my mind, right? Like it absolutely blows my mind. But I think, from the time I met Greg 3 years ago to right now, right? He has attracted a very talented group of people that are working for him. He's also attracted a kick butt advisory council, right? You've got all these people with their columns on Inc. and the Forbes and all this stuff. But I think that the biggest thing is, I want to say that is he attracted them, right? When I came in as a, kind of a freelance person coming into a new job, right? I had no idea what I was in for because will do anything and everything to move mountains for Greg. Like I will find people, I will hunt down incredibly talented people who will take like 1/18 of what they took in corporate because they like working with him. But also, I don't think you can fake that, right? Like I think evidence of like faux culture. And what I mean is, you watch that documentary on WeWork, right? I don't know if it pissed anybody else off, but I watched it. And how many people really bought into this culture and how many people worked for like 1/3 of their pay and literally watched the leader before them squander tons of money, really believed the promise. And so I think that there is a delicate line between creating a narrative, right, which is what I do, living the narrative, implementing the narrative, and making sure that it's not just good marketing, right? Like that's the thing that scares me a lot of, I meet with a lot of YPO guys and EO guys and those organizations can be wonderful, but they can also create this kind of like, any guy that I meet in EO that says that they're a great leader and great corporate culture, you go behind the scenes and you meet the team and he's not even really a factor. They're like, yeah, he goes on speaking tours, but when he comes in the office, it's a mess. Like, so he can, and that I think is a really fine line because marketing a good corporate culture and actually having one is really
two
important.
Different things.
Spot on.
And I think there could be some real, Greg, I think there could be a lot of fun to be had to do a dissection of kind of like the WeWork thing of like, here's some real in that process because people worked at that company 12, 13,
Yep.
14 hours a day because they bought into this culture.
We were tenants.
And I was a tenant there. I
Yep.
had an office there, and you really bought into it. And then you find out, you start talking to employees and you see how they're treated. And it's like, well, they're telling you you can only make minimum wage. You're responsible for thousands of people in this building, but he's off on a private jet to like Coachella. Like
Right.
it doesn't, I think that we have to get back to.
And our culture, unfortunately, celebrates that charismatic CEO who is making hundreds of millions of dollars while everybody else is being shunted to the wayside. So, and that's a problem too, because we're all about the sexy profile, the charisma, the money, the mansions, the cars, and it's, you know, it's funny. I was telling your cousin Kathleen just the other day that when I decided I was going to found my own organization, become a consultant and a trainer and a speaker, that I never got into this business to make millions of dollars. And she goes, "Now you're telling me?" But I do very well. I do very well. I'm not a millionaire, but that's not what's important to me.
It's not your purpose, is it?
It's not my purpose in life, and I'm doing fine. I have a beautiful home and a nice car, but I'm not. It doesn't matter to me to have all this amassed wealth, but our culture celebrates the sexy, wealthy, powerful CEO.
I mean, I have no problem with wealth. I'm just putting it out there. What I like about what you said is that, and oftentimes, really charismatic people put away with exceptionally bad behavior, right? And because they're a nice guy, when they're around you, you just feel good. But that is not sustainable. And again, as we start to wind down for today, I just want to get your guys' kind of final thoughts as we prep to close. You know, we talked about a lot of things around trust and letting things go, and how do you treat, returning the human to human resources? Because right now it just feels like resources, right? I think what you guys have touched on has really hit for most employers right now today that are facing, quote unquote, their labor shortage. They probably should look at why they can't keep people. They should probably look at the questions. Like, if you are still making someone go through 4 rounds of interviews where every interviewer is like, what most excites you about this role? Like, through that process, I wouldn't have believed it. But I went, you made me go, this is a part-time freelance marketing role. 5 people asked me the same set of 3 questions, all taking notes, not looking at me when we were talking. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'd rather, and what's the result, right? They made the offer and I said, no, thank you. Right. And I think what we're on to is just different ways of thinking and being. So with that, I want to get 2 comments, maybe one from each of you on kind of, as you look at this whole thing, right? What's the one thing, like, what's your hope? What do you hope you see kind of in the next 3 to 6 months?
Go for it, Kevin.
My greatest hope would be that the employees have had a really good chance to rethink their life and and where does work fit in for them. I tell you guys, I could sit here and tell you what leaders should do until we're all blue in the face, but until a leader wants to change and create a respectful work environment, it ain't going to happen. I'm here to tell you that's not going to happen.
Right.
However, we as employees or potential employees, we have a lot more ability now to go and ask more questions of these potential employers, and ask them about their purpose. What is it what's the culture like here? There's some technologies and some websites that we can go to get feedback on employees' feelings and input on how it is. I would make sure that we know what level of integrity and respect we demand, and be willing to not sell out on that. And like your son, Greg, he knew he was in a rat hole from the very beginning.
Yep.
And he knew it wasn't going to be very long. And so we can take back some of that responsibility for ourselves and really think about, what are your really, what are your real great gifts? What's your desire and passions? Now, passion isn't about playing golf or doing, woodworking. It's what really lights your candle. What's your inner essence, if you will. And think about what type of work you really want. Be very clear about that, and ask a lot more probing questions when you're in those interviews. And if you get those cookie cutter interviews like Marissa was just saying, to say, hey, stop the I've already answered that question before. I got questions for you, and take over the interview. I've hired people that used to do that to me in a heartbeat, because now they knew what they wanted.
Yes. And I think something you mentioned before about people during COVID, when they were laid off, they started to reevaluate their lives, and they thought, do I really want to go back to that job, which barely paid me enough, where I was treated disrespectfully, or do I want to improve myself? Do I want to learn a new skill? Do I want to go in a new direction, follow my dream and my passion? And I urge everyone, and I always have, follow your dream, follow your passion. And if you stick to it, something will come of it. It's the consistency. It's the follow through. That's not giving up. People often say to me, Greg, how did you become so successful? And I said, well, it's not because I'm that much more talented than anybody else. It's just that once I decided to do something, I kept doing it. I kept trying. And I've failed. I've made huge mistakes, but I learned from them, and I kept trying, and I kept trying to grow. And I realized that if I bring on board, Marissa talks about all the wonderful people who work for us here at the center. They are amazing, and they're dedicated, and they're smart. And you know what? If I've had a number of them come to me over the time and say, Greg, I can't do this anymore. I need to go get a different kind of job for personal reasons, for money, for whatever. I say, good on you. You were great while you were here. Go develop yourself, and maybe someday you can come back and contribute to us. I never want to hold them back, because if they feel like I'm supporting them in growing and developing themselves, then they're going to be that much more loyal and willing to work hard for me. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer, but maybe it is a brainer. I don't.
Well, let me put a button on what we're talking about here. We live in a market economy, right? And a company and a product only exists if there's demand for it, correct? Yep. So what happens if we as employees stop working for idiots and assholes? Let me just ask that question.
That's a good question.
If we just decide we're not going to tolerate disrespect, we're not going to tolerate being not heard and seen, we're not going to tolerate this, and we vote with our feet and we don't work there, I wonder what might happen. So that, you ask me what my hope is in the next 3 to 6 months, 3 to 6 years, 3 to 6 generations. That's my hope. We wake up and we not work for idiots and jerks and whatever colorful metaphors we might want to call them. And I'll leave it at that.
That is a great way to end it.
That is it. You know what? That's a great way to end it. And I want to thank, for those of you that stuck with us for the, last 53 minutes. I appreciate it. I know we had a lot of people coming in and out. Here's my request to you. If you heard something, saw something made you think, something made you angry, something made you excited, take a second, share, comment, forward, give us your feedback, right? We source all of this stuff from what's trending in real time. And what matters to us is that the content is relevant to you. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kevin, so much for your time today.
Thank you,
Greg.
Kevin.
My pleasure, guys.
Wave goodbye to everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.